You are listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And today our guests are
Katey Sheets
and
Adam Caridi.
So can you tell the audience what you guys are doing here at Lewis University?
So I am currently a second-year graduate student in the chemistry department.
Just like Katey, I'm also on my second year in the chemistry department, going for my master's.
Awesome. Welcome. Today's episode, we actually wanted to share with our listeners what the life of a grad student is like.
Because we don't remember.
Oh, I
Because it was
remember.
so
No,
long ago.
no, I remember.
I had too much radiation exposure. I don't remember. I do remember. I did have radiation exposure, though.
Part of the training. Part of the training. But the one thing that I do remember is it's just another part of growing up academically. And, you know, the undergraduate degree is great, but the graduate degree is almost like a finishing degree. It really helps transition students from, you know, book learning into actually being productive and doing useful things in both laboratory and life settings. But it also can be very draining and time demanding. There's a lot of effort and a lot of work that has to go into it, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. So what do you think? Am I off base with what I just said?
No, honestly, I do agree. It is definitely a different type of learning you do, right? In the class, it's a lot of textbook, can you solve this math equation and whatnot? But once you get to grad school, it's more of, can you take that concept that may slightly loosely be related and try to formulate your own idea and opinion on whatever data you get? But I also do agree with the fact that you have to make sure grad school is something you want to do. Because if it's something you feel you have to do, then you're not going to get through it well. You know, you have to make it a part of your life.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what Adam has said. And it is very time consuming, and time management is also part of the learning experience. But so far, the best thing that I've gotten out of grad school is taking my undergraduate degree, which is, hey, here's what you should think about. But then in your master's degree, this is how you should think about it, how you should structure an argument, how you should structure experimentation, looking at problems and trying to solve them. So it's really just making sure that you're expanding on different things that you're learning in your undergraduate experience and being able to apply them.
So you're really learning how to do things. Is that fair?
Effectively do things and then figure out what to do next, yes.
Yeah, come up with your own ideas and not just do what you're told, but be the person making the decisions and having kind of a check and balance, right, to make sure that your decision was wise and well planned.
So it is that transition from being the sponge, being the student that's a sponge, that's absorbing the information, to actually then dispensing, and maybe that's another way of thinking about it, is using that knowledge and then going off and being productive independent of somebody telling you what to do.
Right. And culturally, like going from an undergrad to a grad student, what would you say, like the social culture, what are the differences or similarities?
I think that's actually a really good question, because there is definitely a change or a transition between your undergrad, where you kind of have more social interactions with maybe even people that are not even doing the same degree path that you are, especially with your general education requirements. But with your graduate degree, you're more around people that are at the same level that you're at that higher degree, and you're also trying to better each other. Like, you're working off of ideas from each other, you're bouncing ideas off of each other. It becomes a little bit more interdisciplinary, so you can have those higher level discussions as well.
Yeah, kind of to add to that, I see the major difference being when you're an undergraduate, right, and you're discussing with your friends or whatnot, it's more of, did I do this right? And there's usually one answer to it, right? Whereas when you're now a graduate level, you can have multiple different pathways to get to that answer, right? So it takes a whole lot more input than there's just one way to get to it. So it's more of, it turns into more of like a challenging discussion intellectually, I'd say, for sure, once you become a grad student.
I remember being an undergrad and having friends from lots of various disciplines and different colleges.
Wait, you had friends?
They said they were my friends.
Okay. All right. That tracks.
Okay. And during the day, just moving around campus quite a bit. And you're shifting your focus, and you're taking a psychology class, and then you're taking a math class, and then you're hanging out at the Union, and then you're going to a basketball game. And, you go out with your friends and have some beer or whatever. And then in graduate school, I remember it being much more focused where, the interactions, the friend groups were much more in one place. And so I would come into the lab and I would be in the same building basically all day long and around similar people instead of just constantly every hour or so shifting the group of people I'm with. You're with similar people for extended periods of time. So back to this social aspect of it, it really has a different vibe than undergraduate.
I agree with that.
What was your life? What was it like for you?
So as an undergrad, I lived on campus the whole time. It was actually a requirement of my college. You couldn't live off campus. So it was, and I went to a school of like 1,200 students. So you kind of knew everybody. All my best friends are from college, and all different. Yes,
from undergrad.
Undergrad, yeah, and all different disciplines. So I was the only biochem major in my friend group, my close friend group. But then when I went to graduate school, I actually worked for a while before I went back to graduate school after undergrad. And so I already had like my own apartment, was living by myself, like kind of had an established life. So to me, it was a little more like a job than a social experience. And but the people in the lab that I worked with became like a family to me. I remember I was crushed once when my PI, her daughter still is named Lorelei, and we were just talking. I was like, "Oh, I really like that name, but now I guess if I have a daughter, I can't name her that because that's your daughter's name." And she said, "Aren't I kind of just on the periphery of your life?" And I was like, "Oh my God, right now you are my life. Like, this is what I do every day."
I'm here. That's right.
I was like, "Your opinion matters so much," but I'm still in contact with her. I never had a daughter, so I guess it didn't come up. But do you guys feel like your lab group in grad school is sort of a family?
Most definitely. I mean, those are the people you're interacting with day in, day out. They know you sometimes more than you know yourself, so you definitely become like a family.
Yeah, they say when you're picking who to work with that your PI, whichever PI you pick, it's like getting into a marriage. So you want to pick the right person to work with, or it's going to be a really uncomfortable experience.
I'm not sure marriage is the right word to use here, but it definitely is a close personal relationship.
Right.
And that's one of the things is to, when you find a graduate program, you can't just force yourself to do it. It really has to become a passion. It has to be something that when you wake up in the morning, you're like, okay, I want to go in. And some days are easier than others, but it can't just be one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is just what I'm doing for right now. Because the demands are just too high. It's very difficult to finish if you don't have that self-motivation.
What's your favorite thing about being a grad student right now?
Podcasts?
This thing you've done once? Highlight.
I think my favorite thing would be the intellectual freedom I get as a graduate student. So I can and also I guess make a schedule in terms of, I know I have all these things I have to get done by, let's say, Friday. I don't want to work on this right now. I've got plenty of other things to do. Personally, I like being busy. Like, it's just a part of who I am, I guess. But just that ability to be busy, make my own schedule in terms of what I get to work on and when, and the constant thought that I get to put into one or two areas. Whereas when I was an undergrad, I had to think about electives, I had to think about gen eds, all that kind of stuff. Grad school, I'm focused on my projects and my one or two courses that I'm taking. So it really lets me hone in, and I feel like I can do a whole lot better job than I would.
I would say it's two things, where one is the constant learning. You're bettering yourself in the context of your intellectual abilities, not only in the way to learn, but also the content. and it's based solely on your research and making sure that you're reading literature, understanding your data, going through not necessarily the motions, but starting at some random idea in your research to then keep honing into, hey, I have this problem, but I think I found an answer. Let's dig into it deeper. But then also part of being a graduate student at Lewis typically means that you're also a graduate assistant, which means you're helping teach courses or teach labs for undergraduates. And that for me has been really fun to interact with the students and aid not only in my learning in how to effectively teach, but also aid in their learning to make sure that they might have the same opportunities that I have as a graduate student.
Two things I want to feed off of that you just commented about. One is this notion of learning how to solve problems. And I've always thought about when I explain what grad school is to other people, it's like, well, you go to school and they throw roadblocks in front of you and then watch you work your way across them. And learning how to do that on your own without somebody telling you how to get across that roadblock, solve that problem. It's the problem-solving skills that you're developing as a grad student that really are the key skill set that you can then take out and use in the real world. And then the other part about it is it's also where you begin to first start really, truly teaching other people. And so how has teaching other students impacted you here at Lewis University?
For me personally, it's been compounding on what I've learned. So I might sit down with a student and they'll say, hey, I have this X problem. I don't know how to do this. And I might go, okay, well, I know how to do it this way. But then they might say, well, my professor's teaching me this way. So then you're effectively learning possibly two different ways to get to the same answer, which is what research typically is, hey, there might be various ways to get to the same answer, but also effectively communicating, because you might explain something in one way and the student might not understand that in that way. So then you have to reframe the way that you're going through chasing the problem, or going through the problem to get to the end goal.
Does that help you get a deeper understanding of the content yourself?
Absolutely.
And there's an old adage that you don't really know something until you've taught it.
Yeah, or if you can't explain it to another person, you don't understand it.
Yes. And so if you ever want to test yourself to find out how thoroughly you actually understand something, go find somebody else and see if you can explain it to them.
So a big part of scientific research is failure, right? When experiments don't work or you get unexpected results or equipment breaks. So how do you guys cope with, how do you gain resiliency, or how do you cope with the failure that does come with trying to be a researcher?
I feel like that's kind of two-part, like you said, because it could either be like a broken instrument, or it could be something like you thought the experiment was going to work, but it didn't. Both of them are very difficult because not necessarily formally trained to fix instruments, but I do occasionally. The fun thing about going to Lewis is that a lot of our instruments are kind of custom made, in terms of either we work with the company to custom make it, or there's a random graduate student that custom makes something. At the current moment, that's me.
But that's a good skill set.
It is.
You are my
For
3D
sure.
printer.
Correct, yes. But in terms of when the research fails, it's more of you just kind of have to step back and kind of think why. I forgot exactly what the law was. I believe it's Kinder's law, but essentially it says figuring out what went wrong is halfway to figuring out what to do next. So you have to be able to identify all your factors, right? In research, depending on what you're doing, for us specifically in chemistry, there's so many moving parts, so many moving things.
Try working with a living organism.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Keeps walking away.
I'm good. But yeah, no. So it's nothing, you can't like take it personal, right? It happened. This is why you're here. You signed up to fail. The only way to grow is through mistakes and through things not working. You know, sometimes the smartest people are the ones that have tried to do the most things, and more than half those things have failed. So now they know, can't do that. So it's just that kind of resilience, and you just kind of have to know, you know, it's all about a mindset of, okay, what's next? How can I do this different? What variable can I change now?
I tend not to think of it as failure. For myself, I tend to think of it as, well, that didn't work. Try something else. And so it's a momentary setback along a longer journey. And I might have thought that the journey was going to be 3 steps, but it ended up being 10 steps. And so it's just learning and discovering and finding out that it's a richer area. If it turns out that you can solve something relatively quickly, then you haven't learned an awful lot. But if the journey is deeper and richer and longer, then in fact I found that I learned more along the way. So it's always kind of fun to find out that, ooh, this is more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I'm going to have to start digging deep and figuring out this one. And that actually gets me excited. So I'm not necessarily sure that failure is the way I might frame it, but just the intricacies and the complexities associated with this are much more significant than I anticipated. That's very interesting.
Isn't it that famous Einstein quote that if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research? Is that Einstein?
No, that was you.
Oh, that was not me.
Well, a quick question I have for both of you, maybe this is a nice way to round out the conversation, is if you had something about graduate education that you'd like to share with undergraduates, saying, well, this is what you have to look forward to, or this is how things are going to be different, what would you want to share with them?
It's a toughie.
I feel like it's a complex question that requires a complex answer, but it might just be really, really simple in the fact that know what you want out of it, but also make sure that you're working toward bettering yourself and others, not just, not for selfish reasons, but to make sure that you are leaving an impact on not only yourself, but others in a positive way.
And Adam?
I'd say the biggest thing is you just have to know that it's what you want, not something that your parents want or that your friends want. It's got to be something that you want yourself. Because if it's something that you truly want, then you will be able to wake up every morning and want to go in, even if it's not the easiest of times.
Well, thanks for sharing that, guys. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. You've been listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White
and
Katey Sheets
and
Adam Caridi.
Thanks.
Bye.